Joel Mela. And of course, David Vargo. I'm here to discuss his testimony of how he made it through cancer. Mm-hmm. Now, I have posted some other stories. Diana Fuentes and briefly Deborah is another lady who's dealt with cancer. They both are cancer-free, but I believe, Joel, you have a testimony that's a little different. Yeah. You also are cancer-free, but the way you went through it, you have a unique story.
I do, yeah. I'd like to share it. Along the way, I might help with some language, though. So in the cancer world, in most cancers, you're not considered cancer-free until you've hit a 5-year mark. Otherwise, you are simply in remission. So right now, I'm still in remission. It's been 3 years, but I'm closer and closer to medically being considered cancer-free. But I'm 33 years old. I've been married for 12 years. We have 3 kids, Miles, Ada, and Lance, who we love. They're 6, 3, and 1 now, 6, 4, and 1. But I'm 33 now, but some of my story kind of ties in with, well, most of my story ties in with my faith. And so I wanted to share a little bit as far as the faith aspect. My parents moved down to Florida from Maine, dragged me and my brother and sister down with us. We were not excited about it. It was my senior year. But my father became just hungry for revival, hungry for the Lord, and needed to pull us out of the environment that we're in. So we transitioned from Maine to Florida simply to go to a church, which was not that interesting when I was 15. But at this church, I met my wife there. We got married there. I was 21. Went to school around here, USF. Graduated in finance. And just kind of climbed the corporate ladder and was trying to make a name for myself in that world, in the world of banking and insurance. And so life was good. We bought our first house at 23, when I was 23, in Riverview. And things were moving on track. And then when I was 26, when I was young, right, everything just started to take a turn for the worst, unexpectedly. So, as with most people's stories, it starts with a bump. I had a bump on my neck, and I had just different symptoms like cold sweats, itchy body, different things like this. Went from one doctor to the next to do a biopsy, and then it comes back as being cancer. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was called large B cell type. There's all these subtypes, but it was lymphoma, right? And part of my story is that my mother had recently passed away from cancer when I was diagnosed. Only a few years prior, my mother passed away from breast cancer. A rough battle, right? Mastectomies, all the conveyor belt stuff that you see anybody with a cancer diagnosis go through. That was hard to watch. But even when I was diagnosed with cancer, we were very hopeful, my wife and I, Brittany. Not for a long time did we sense any type of fear or discouragement. We're grateful for the church family that we had. That was very encouraging. And we grew up learning how to have faith in the midst of situations, and learning that if there's a mountain, if there's a problem, that's just going to be an opportunity for God to get glory, and we're gonna fight this thing. And so I'm going to talk a lot about us, which is my wife and I, because it very much so was a battle that we both fought.
You did have Lance was born at that time.
Lance was we were pregnant when I was diagnosed, and he was born just before I went into the hospital the first time. So that was a whole nother whirlwind of family dynamics that added to the complexity of things. But I was diagnosed at 26. At the time, I didn't have health insurance, so I couldn't just go right into the medical world to see an oncologist because we didn't have insurance. And things were very small and very slow. And so I took a season of about 6 to 9 months to just try to do everything we could outside of seeing an oncologist to see if we could get a grip on this thing, right? And so we went on a very, very focused journey on personal health. We did a lot of research and read a lot of books, listened to a lot of people, a lot of podcasts about diet, lifestyle, a variety of things, everything that you can do naturally to try to help your body fight cancer.
Which is also good to be healthy anyway, even
all
if you're trying to deal with cancer, but you also
all the stuff that we learned health-wise in that season and in the years coming after that,
Continue to.
we still talk about it. We still live it out as much as we can. Not as much now as we should. But I pay the price for it sometimes. So anyways, I went full vegan, only raw vegetables. I juiced a lot. I turned orange.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing that.
I did. It's not like jaundice. It's the carotene, which is good. My palms were orange. A raw vegan diet, and taking a lot of supplements. Seeing an alternative doctor who could work with us to an extent, and just jumping around to different alternative things. And we leaned hard into the alternative medicine world. But I would basically say this, that for me, it was too little and too late. If I was living that lifestyle 3, 4, 5 years prior, it may have been a different situation, right? But it was too little, too late. But by the time that I had insurance, we were so sold on the alternative medicine world that we just turned our backs on traditional medicine entirely, right? On the oncologist world and all that. Probably not the best move, because my particular cancer, which is interesting, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, is the cancer that chemotherapy was first successful on.
Oh, really?
And so they say that if you're going to get any cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is the best, right? Because it's actually extremely treatable. But at this point, I was way too devoted and invested into the traditional side, the alternative side. It was too late, too little, too late. The swelling increased, my fatigue increased. I began to look more and more sickly, partly because I was eating raw vegetables for a diet, but also because the cancer was spreading, was growing. I began to have seizures, but I didn't know they were seizures. They were petite seizures where I would taste things or feel things or see things and not really understand it. It would be heavy doses of what's the word when you feel like you're a kid again, right? Of that what's the word?
Thinking back on your childhood.
Yeah, thinking back on your childhood, right? Just things that reminded me of my childhood a lot, but I didn't realize it. Like smells would trigger it. They were petite seizures I was having in the workplace, right? And as those progressed, I did end up having a grand mal seizure, which was like, eyes rolled in the back of your head on the floor, right? I was at home, and Brittany found me having a seizure. This is the first seizure. And that seizure, she brought me to the hospital, and I was okay, came out of the hospital. A few weeks later, I had another grand mal seizure though, but this is one that was really, really bad. I hit my head on the bathtub in the bathroom, and so Brittany walks in, and there's blood. I'm writhing on the floor. It's a scary mess. And she's got a 2-month-old in her arms, right, Lance at the time. And that was the one that brought me into the hospital for an extended time. And in that seizure and that head injury, but mostly from the rare crossover of my cancer and the seizure, I actually had quite a bit of memory loss. Most of that time that I'm sharing, I only know secondhand from Brittany telling it so much. I'm probably messing up the dates and the time frames, but you get the idea. Brittany could do a better job because she was actually there. Right. But I lost about a year to 2 years of memory for a time. Couldn't remember anything. I didn't remember Lance being born. Mm-hmm. There were days in the hospital where like every time Lance came in the room, I would be like awestruck and overwhelmed with like, oh my gosh, I'm a father. Like, let me hold my baby. Like, it was real, man. Uh-huh. And Brittany's there watching, just like feeling broken every time we have to go through this again. Joel, you have cancer. You hit your head. You're in the hospital. I'd wake up. Where am I? What's going on? The beautiful thing is during that season, which was one of the lowest parts of this. This is why I'm taking time on that. Brittany challenged me to keep a journal. And I wish I would have brought the journal with me because it would have had some entries that would shock you. But I read back in the journal. I don't remember this time at all. But so many times the journal would sound like this. I don't know where I am. Somebody brought me lunch. Lance is so beautiful. I know that God's going to take care of me. Like, it was over and over again. The next day, I don't know what happened. I guess I hit my head. This is so weird. I don't feel very good. I know God is going to take care of this. Like,
I'm sorry. Didn't also your father send you a message or something?
My dad, during that
time?
during that time, people would send me all kinds of stuff, right? But one of the things that was sent to me was a song by Jeremy Riddle that we still do on Sunday mornings here called You Are Good, with the bridge that says, you're never going to let me down, you're never going to let me down. That was a song that ministered to me in a lot of ways and brought encouragement and helped with my faith.
That's the song your dad sent you?
Mm-hmm, it is. Excuse me. And so that was the season in the hospital. And at that point in time, one part that I skipped, they actually, when I first went to the hospital, this is very interesting.
The first grandma?
Excuse me. The second time I went to the hospital, that was very serious. I was in triage. Brittany was not allowed to see me. Like, I was not allowed to be seen by anybody. They didn't know what was going on. My old youth pastor, as well as other friends and family, came to the hospital. Couldn't see me, couldn't visit me. But Brittany just felt faith rise, and she said, you guys need to lay hands on me and pray for me like I'm Joel right now. And they laid hands on her and prayed and spoke the word of God over her, because we believe that we're one flesh, and there is something significant that happens when you pray that way, when there's no other way to reach me. And they prayed that way, and like within moments, the doctors came out and said, he's stable, we'll, in the morning, perhaps he can have visitors. But that was a really significant moment. So that season was very dark, the injury, the memory loss, the confusion, being unable to see my family, being really on the brink of death at that point from the seizures more than anything. And the doctors were basically like, look, if we give this guy chemotherapy, we promise you he will have relief almost immediately. And so through convincing my wife, even though we were sold out on no chemotherapy, we said, okay, let's try it. So they hit me with chemotherapy, my first dose, and within a day, I was almost normal. Things were shrinking. Things were shrinking at such a fast pace, it was coming out of my pores, almost to the extent of that. My neck was swollen, huge. It was pretty bad. But when they gave me the chemotherapy, it worked very quickly. In that time, that was also a very difficult time. I'm still very confused because of the head injury. For a long time, I would be very confused where I was, what was going on. With the chemotherapy treatments, my entire body itched like a disease, like leprosy. It itched so bad. I would dig into my skin until I would almost bleed so badly. I actually have permanent hyperpigmentation on my back from scratch marks because the itching was so bad. The only thing that was a solution was a microfiber blanket, believe it or not. If I laid on those very soft plush blankets, if I laid on a blanket like that, it would bring me immediate relief. Wow. And so I would be like curled up in a blanket for days because of the itching and the chemotherapy. So, yeah.
I was going to say, during this, you said dark time, and it was hard time physically, emotionally, mentally, but somehow through that, you had this assurance that God was there, like it would be okay.
Yeah,
so,
even in my subconscious,
yes,
when I'm not even, I'm like, I don't even know where I am, but there's this sense of still the Lord's presence and faithfulness that I was able to cling to. It was really, really amazing.
That's critical.
God's faithfulness, and my faith was strong, and it's great because Brittany's faith was not very strong in that time, but the Lord is gracious in that way. So I went through 9 months of chemotherapy at that point. I wish I would have tried to take some notes and remember, but it was 4 letters, ABVD or something like this. So I took 4 different types of chemotherapy. It's, any regimen of chemo they do, it's a combination of drugs. And I was there, I think, every other week or every 3 weeks. And that was hard. I lost my hair. I got pneumonia in my lungs. At one point, I could barely breathe for a time. So I did get sick a couple of times. The drugs were, not only were the chemotherapy drugs knocking me out, but the additional drugs I had to take, which included certain steroids, really messed with like my sleep habits, and it was a hard 9 months. One thing that I did during that 9 months, just to stay sane, just to feel productive, is whenever I was feeling better, I would actually go into the studio and I would write songs. I went into the studio and I would write about my experiences with cancer and what I'm working through, and just all the dynamics of also being a father and being husband and these different things. And I actually wrote 10 songs, recorded them, and produced them all within that period of time when I was feeling well, because I was just home. I wasn't working. So I thank God for my company that paid for. We're very generous with the leave, so that we were never really without.
That's good.
But it was still, so financially God came through. But anyway, so I wrote a whole album during that time because I had the time. But it was a wonderful way, a gift from the Lord to be able to process what was going on, you know. And so I wrote about stuff like, you know, I've thinking about Paul when he wrote to the Corinthian church is like, I've been with and when I've been without, or that's Philippians, I think, or James, I can't think of it now. But he says, I've been with and I've been without, and I've learned to be content in all things, right?
That's Philippians.
And yes, in Philippians, thank you. So I wrote about how, like, listen, I've had, you know, we just bought our house, I had a great job, I had my degree, right? We were doing good, and then next thing you know, it's all taken away from me. I'm knocking on death's door with a head injury, right? And so, like, I've seen it both ways, but I know that I will. I'll be. The song is about being a servant to all, because by being on the highest of highs and lowest of lows, you learn to serve people and to be able to connect with